What's up, guys? We are here with a special guest today on the Artist Emancipation podcast, Jake Olson, who I am so excited to talk to because the only role that you've ever played in my life is a teacher in photography class when I knew absolutely nothing and looked like a complete dumbass. So let's talk. Jake, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be the amazing photographer that you are.
Oh man, I mean that's really generous just right out of the gate. But no, I'm super excited to talk to you. Like you said, I was your Photo 101 teacher up at Midwest, which is a blast. It is really interesting to see how like creatively talented and intuitive you are, having had that experience with you in like a teaching setting, right? Because I'm sitting here thinking like people who come into that class are trying to figure out where their shutter button is, and at the same time you have this really cool like creative expertise, and you kind of approach it in a really cool way. So I'm excited to have this conversation and kind of separate it just from that like that teaching or teacher-student kind of relationship. So yeah, as
Yes.
far as myself and kind of where I came from and what I'm doing, right? So I'm a photographer. I do a little bit of teaching, obviously, but primarily I focus on a lot of kind of commercial and documentary photography. And I've started to kind of define myself as a commercial photographer who specializes in kind of the intersection of brand and sport and storytelling, kind of just the culmination of things that I've loved in the past, all coming together to let me do the work that I want to do, which is kind of what we all set out to do, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm from north central Minnesota. I don't know if anybody out there in the in the digital audience knows where Duluth, Minnesota is, but I'm kind of right up in that area. Slowly, I guess, making my way east. I moved from Duluth to Wisconsin, and now I'm living in Ohio, obviously, and yeah, kind of loving it. Columbus is a really great city to thrive creatively in. So.
Oh, absolutely. And just a little bit about like your history as an artist. Were you always into photography or did it kind of grow from something else? Like what was the moment that you were like, I kind of love photo?
Yeah, no, great question. I think everybody has a different journey with their own kind of creative experience, right? Mine should have been pretty laid out for me. My parents met at art school in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is a very cutesy story. Unfortunately, neither of them were ever practicing artists after their time in art school, and I myself grew up without kind of th- realizing that I had such super talented parents or artists as parents, right? So it wasn't until actually after high school and after I'd left where I started to kind of develop my own relationship with art and creativity. It actually happened as a result of an injury. I wrestled in college, loved every second of it. At one point during kind of my junior year of college, all but turned my foot around backwards. It was pretty gnarly. Just a practice move gone wrong, right? And then I ended up just picking up a camera and working as the team photographer for a couple weeks. It was something that I'd like loved the idea of, right? Everybody sees these really cool action photos of their friends, and they want to be the one to provide those. At that point, it was really just a hobby. It was kind of something that like it was the next best thing to being on the mat, right, competing for this team. So I got a little bit of experience in there, and then actually the year following that, I went and lived in Australia for 8 months, and then was able to kind of refine some of what I wanted to do with that camera while I was on that trip.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. I laugh because I had a very similar experience, and I'm
Yeah.
just talking to one of my friends who is going through the same thing right now. It's like the universe literally had to break your foot to get you to pay attention to art. And I
Right,
like
for
I had to
real.
hurt two discs in my back to like sit the fuck down and like pay attention to what I was supposed to be doing, right? So it's kind of funny how it all works out.
Yeah,
But what I love about you, so I'm going to tell you like embarrassing shit when I first met you.
yeah.
So I went into this photo class, and guys, if you're listening, this was just like a basic photo 101 class.
I think it was
And
101. Yeah.
yeah, and it's for people who basically know jack shit about cameras, which was me. I know nothing about. I know a little bit now thanks to Jake, but it was a very interesting concept to me. And I was like putting this into the universe that I was going to go out and I was going to make artist friends and I was going to surround myself with more artistic people just to like be more outgoing in that area, right? So I walk in with the intention that I'm going to make friends in this class. And the teacher's going to be some old guy who's just like fucking pulling out a camera and showing me the pieces. And I walk in and you had the best energy ever. And I was like, oh my God, is this it? Is this the teacher? Like, is this him? And then I was like so nervous the whole class because I'm like, he's like my age. And I'm like, he's a genius and he's great. And like, so I was like so taken back, one, by like your presence in a classroom, and two, the passion that you have for what you teach. It like shines through. And that's what I love about you. And that's why I eventually, asked to talk to you like this, is because like it's very rare to find people, especially artists, who are so passionate about the behind the scenes stuff that goes into their artwork. Like for you, it's very much like, I'm trying to explain this in a way that the listeners will understand. When we walk into photo one, you don't teach like, this is exactly how you use the camera. You're like,
Yeah.
these are the technical tools, but I want you to focus on the idea of what you're trying to photograph, right? So how did you get that idea of teaching? Because it's so different than even in art school, anything that I experienced, it was like you actually cared about the mind behind the technical skill. So how
Yeah.
did you approach your teaching in that arena?
No doubt. First of all, thank you so much for acknowledging that. Like, if I were able to choose a soapbox, right, that I want to speak to the creative community about, it is kind of this bigger concept than just technical photography. And it is really, I want to make sure that people who are out there looking to practice things creatively and experience, art as a lot of us do. I want to be able to set people up for success long term, right? I have always kind of described myself as somebody who lives exactly the life I want to, and I love everything that I do. Photography just happens to be the medium through which I can most effectively communicate to people, right? So when I'm teaching, and you ask how I kind of came up with that concept or decided that was the lane that I wanted to teach through, what it started with was, how can I most effectively help these people achieve the same level of creative fulfillment that I have, right? And it wasn't through learning little like tips and tricks or super technical things about a camera. It was through turning that camera into a tool that I can use to make the things that exist in my head, right? And personally for me, that ends up being a lot of this. You've seen my work. Obviously, it's a lot of like gritty street style documentary kind of things. But that has kind of just been the right medium for me to observe stories and then tell them to others, and at the same time kind of fulfill my own creative desire to share other people's experiences. Yeah, so that was a really convoluted, long way of saying that I just want to make sure that people are loving it. I want to make sure that people set out to go make an image, and when they do make it, it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm gonna like talk about your work. So make sure you send me this picture so I can show the viewers. But I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
there was this one image that you shared in a class, and it was like, you were traveling, and it was like a view of the city coming over this guy's shoulder, and like there was this red flag in the corner, and it just like blew my mind because you have such an eye to like capture a moment that happens maybe in a second, maybe a millisecond, and you're able to tell like a full story in one photograph. So like 1 second, your eye is just like, bam, it's there, right? And so and it's with all of your work. Like, and there was another one that was like a stairway in an airport, and it like showed the journey of the guy going through. Like, it was just amazing because each one had a story. So how did you train your eye and your mind to kind of look for these moments in real life?
Yeah, the boring answer to that is a lot of pre-production, a lot of planning, and a lot of kind of setting the intention well ahead of time, right? So the images that you're referencing, I actually have them printed on my back wall over here.
I
So
love
I'm
it.
looking at them as you're saying it. But no, I think a lot of that comes from having that preparedness to capitalize on that moment presenting itself, right? So both of those are from a piece of, a body of work that I did in Norway that was all about finding the peace that comes from completing a long journey and being close to home, right? And so just with that concept in mind, it was really easy to pick out moments that exist in time that fit that narrative. So, for example, the one of the guy going down the escalator, that was actually in the central train station in Oslo at about, I guess, probably like 2 to 3 p.m., where the sun is setting in this really like long lateral light. But it really did kind of bring in feelings of comfortability, right? You could feel like this guy's leaving the train station after maybe commuting to work or going on a ski trip or something like that. A lot of it has to do with that pre-production, that work on the front end, but then really setting your mind up creatively to capitalize on those and kind of be in tune with your surroundings and recognize that that feeling is represented in that photo. All I have to do is then make that photo. I guess, yeah, I started that as being the boring answer, but it kind of came around to the interesting one too.
But no, I literally have it in my notes to ask you about intentional artwork because, like, I feel you're the perfect example of that. Even when we started a photo walk the one time, you made us all like say, what do we want to focus on in this little walk, right? And a photo walk for the listeners is basically where you just go out with your camera and take pictures of shit, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you have to be very in tune, not only with like the intention, but also how you feel in that moment and like your emotions coming through. So I love the process that you do with other people and in your own artwork. So I guess like the question here is, if somebody is looking to begin, it doesn't have to be photography. It just has to any kind of artwork. What is the best advice that you can give somebody to really approach intentionality in their artwork?
Yeah. Again, phenomenal question. I love that. I think that intention has to come with a goal, right? There has to be a finish line. Otherwise, you're not necessarily looking to complete something, right? Your intention without a finish line is really just inspiration. And inspiration's awesome and amazing, and everybody should feel inspired all the time. But the thing that separates that from being something that is more actionable and something that can result in a finished body of work is knowing kind of where that product exists. For me, for example, you're talking about how to apply more intention, right? Can you hit me with the back half of that question again? Just because I got a little bit off the rails there.
No, I do that shit all the time. If somebody's like going into photography or an
Yeah.
art, whatever they want, how can they set up their mind correctly to go into an intentional practice rather than just going out and being random about it?
Yes, love it. Phenomenal. I think one of the best ways to make that happen and to get into that intentional headspace, right, and go out to make work with an intention is to sit down and just accept what is kind of going on around you. At the end of the day, what we're able to do as creative people is process all of the things that are inspiring us at every moment of the day, right? You can sit and go through a 24-hour day and throughout social media and conversation and music and your radio in your car and billboards, you're constantly consuming things that can be a source of inspiration. Without processing all that effectively into something that you're proud of and something that is just kind of the product of that inspiration, I feel like you can get kind of jammed up, right? And you can kind of reach that creative fatigue where you feel like you're fighting against it. So
Yes.
part of being able to actually make things with intention is just kind of getting into that headspace of processing inspiration and then applying that to the things that inspire you or the things that you're intending to make. So, for example, let's circle back again to that photo of the guy going down the escalator. I'm really going to have to make sure I send you this one so you know. Personally, I'm really inspired by long afternoon light, public transit, and for some reason, people in suits. I don't know what it is. It always makes it feel like they're completing some big task that's going to result in, I don't know, some big business turn. I don't know, whatever. You get what I'm saying, right? So that image is the example of those external signals being processed into an image that reflects the vision that I had for the project. So,
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Did that sound
Yes.
like a whole load of bullshit? Okay.
You're exactly like me where I answer questions and I black out. I'm like, I have no idea what the fuck I just said. But it
I
makes
know what I
complete
want to say. I know what A to Z looks like. B through Y is just absolute.
No, but it did. It made perfect sense. So
Good.
fantastic.
Also, thank you for setting the tone and allowing us to swear on this podcast because I was a little hesitant. I don't know what you're.
Have you heard me speak?
Not
Every
outside of
other
a classroom setting, so no, not really.
I'm a fucking sailor. It's fine.
Incredible.
Yes, but I also wanted to ask you too, because a lot of people who listen to this podcast are just starting out on their business journey, right? So they've
Yeah.
come to this point in their lives where they're like, yes, I'm an artist. It's no longer just a side thing. I really want to dive into making money. And I believe firmly that artists can make a shit ton of money if they put their mind to it. We no longer have to be the starving artist, the shitty person on the corner asking for money, whatever. That's not an artist anymore. So you clearly have a very amazing business going for you, whether it's the commercial photography, working with brands, and then you also have another company where you're doing headshots now. So
Yeah.
how have you utilized kind of building your reputation, your body of work to really start making money and building a business?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. Let me put on my business hat really quickly. um, no, okay, so I think one of the biggest things to recognize is that artists just don't have to be starving, right? We're able to provide a really killer service that more often than not, people who are in a position to be spending that money want to, not even want to, need to engage with in order to kind of capitalize on what is a really important part of their journey, right? You talk about my headshots business, right? So this
Yeah.
entire thing is focused on providing a quick, effective, easy solution for people whose lives are set up in a way that they don't have time for creative calls and they don't have probably 4 hours to come in for a portrait session where we sit down and we talk about the feelings associated with a slight chin angle, right?
Right.
So what that business is set up to do is rewrap the service that I offer to agencies and brands to be more suitable for those folks that maybe have 30 minutes between meetings on a Friday to pop in and have a new portrait taken. So part of it is recognizing that you have a valuable service that people want to engage with, but it's not always perfectly suited or perfectly wrapped up for them in a nice little package, right? So as much as it sucks to have to compromise as an artist, the business piece of that is recognizing where your audience is and where you're going to connect with them and set yourself up to be in the best position to make money off of that. And to be honest, I hate using the term like, oh, making money, because I feel like that kind of, it takes away some of the value of the service you're able to provide, right? Because anybody can like hustle and grind and send bad photos to a trillion clients, right?
Yes.
But that's not gonna really set yourself up for long-term success. I'm really
Exactly.
glad that you mentioned kind of using the reputation. And one thing that I really pride myself on is building things really, really slow, knowing that the compound interest on 1% growth every day is going to be a lot more valuable in 5 years than trying to grow something to 100% tomorrow. And that kind of exists within this Ohio Headshots brand as well as just my photography brand, right? Which I guess is just Jake Olson, right? Little stick man. I'm sure you've seen the stick man.
We'll show him. He's cute.
We're forever intertwined at this point, me and that stick man. But yeah, I think another part of that kind of successful growth is just recognizing that it doesn't happen overnight. And as much as artists who are typically people who are pretty predisposed to not being super patient, as much as it sucks to have to hear that, right? That maybe waiting a few years and growing slowly is going to be the thing that kind of tips that scale in favor of starting to commercialize and start to make some money with your product. It is the truth of it.
Yeah, 100%. And I always tell people too when they're first starting out, it's like you can look at other photographers. Like part of being an artist is creatively coming up with offers. Like you said, like you've done this package that fits people in a specific need, right? And that's how you're making money is because not everybody is offering that. So when you're a new artist coming into this space, of course you're going to look at other people, but that time and experience of working with your clients is going to give you the feedback you need in order to create something so unique that people want to work with you, right? And that,
Right.
like you said, is time, is experience, is shit that you just don't walk in and are ready to provide people with because artists are patient. They're not patient at fucking all. And it's almost like we're forced to be patient to come up with those offers because
Right.
me being a graphic designer, I can come online and see exactly what other graphic designers are doing and I can mimic them all I want, but I'll never be successful in my own right which I think every artist craves, is because we're so individual and we're so, I don't want to say bitchy about being our own person, but we totally are.
No, you're spot on. And that actually, honestly, that's a really good point, and it's in line with a couple conversations I've been having recently with artists who, because of that predisposition to really value individuality and identity, really struggle with changing their service or their offer in order to suit the needs of the people that they're trying to sell to. So I think specifically for new artists or emerging artists who are trying to commercialize their service, part of being able to do that super effectively is coming from a place of humility and recognizing that your service is not going to be devalued. Your brand is likely not going to be devalued because you're changing that offer to meet the needs of your consumer, right?
Right.
If you're a street painter, if you're Banksy, obviously he's not changing his, processes for anybody. But
Right.
that's also because he's kind of transcended that need to sell to a specific group. I think a lot about photographers who are trying to add commercial work to a wedding portfolio. It's really hard to do because the things that sell weddings are really aesthetic Instagram feeds. It's being able to connect really deeply on a personal level with clientele, that sort of thing. The things that sell in a commercial capacity are really quick sales pitches, being able to convert eyes on your website to inquiry within like 30 seconds. No agency wants to sit and try to have to, scrub through your site to find your contact button.
Yes.
So I've definitely seen people struggle to kind of sell to both markets, mostly based on their the perceived devaluation that'll happen to the thing that they care so deeply about if they were to make a compromise and start selling to, say, agencies or to, different brands and commercial businesses. So that's definitely a challenge, and it's really hard to do that, mostly because so many of us start our careers because we have something that we want to talk about, we have a story that we want to tell, and we nestle that thing, and it's like a little ember, right? You're trying really hard to keep that thing alive and start to have that conversation. And then if somebody says, oh, well, you have to change that thing because I want to give you money for it, it's really hard to accept that changing that thing a little bit, or maybe changing it with your intention, and recognizing it's really hard to accept that has to be the truth of the matter in order to start to make money.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's almost like a lot of the artists that I work with when I'm mentoring them, they have like a 9 to 5 and they're like, I feel so much shame around that I can't be an artist full time or I can't do the thing full time. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no shame in making money to support the thing that you really want to do, right? And it's kind of the same scenario. It's like, yeah, maybe you do have to change one or two things, but like you're being given the financial freedom to pursue the actual thing that you want. And I always tell people,
Yeah.
who gives a shit how you make the money? If you can do whatever you want, well, don't go strip and stuff, but don't be a slut.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Or do that. I mean, hey, we're pro. Yeah. We're very, yeah.
But yeah, it's very interesting how artists feel so connected to their work, like obviously, right? But it's like when it comes to making money, it always gets separated.
It is really hard to take that deep emotional connection and try to change that for somebody else. I think one way of doing that, or one way that I've found to do that, is to really draw a hard line between the two. So this is my commercial work, this is my documentary work, this is my personal project, this is my Ohio Headshots business, right? Aside from a few connectors, like my email being the thing that connects the businesses, on Squarespace, there's nothing else that really draws those lines. So I don't feel like I'm devaluing my personal work by promoting it alongside something that is a service that's geared towards, business people. So I think defining those lines is really important, but unfortunately artists tend to struggle with defining lines anyway.
Yeah.
I also like that you mentioned working a 9 to 5 to support the passion, right, or support the dream, mostly because if you think about those two things as kind of parallel experiences and parallel, just portions of our lives, right? If the 9 to 5 supports you financially and the art supports you emotionally, those two things have a really high potential of finding a nice, even balancing point where
Yes.
you're really getting two entirely different products out of both practices that both support you in a really essential kind of way.
Right.
I feel like I've known people who are the hardest workers at their 9 to 5 and work equally as hard in their creative pursuits. And most people might look at that and go, wow, how on earth do you manage this balance? How do you find this level of like equilibrium between two really challenging things to sustain? And it has less to do with rest versus active hours and so much more to do with kind of effort versus creative fulfillment, right? Those two things tend to kind of equal each other out and make life really enjoyable, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always like, I don't know. Because I think of my life and I'm like, but I was also miserable at my 9 to 5. I think some people are really good at handling like real life and then their like creative personal life. Me, I'm like, I live on another planet, so I can't do it.
Yeah, you
But
do seem to live all in what you're doing, and I love that about you. That's just,
right.
it's great that you're aware of that as your own journey, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and but it's always so interesting because it's like artists always try to solidify themselves as one thing, and it's like we're always evolving. Like what I like right now, what's catching my interest in my work is going to change maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next fucking year, you know? So like to give yourself that freedom of like I'm able to be mutable through these changes of my life and also have financial backing to it, like why would you not do it?
Yeah.
So I always
Yeah.
tell people not to feel fucking shame when it comes to that type of stuff, and just like however it works, it works.
Yeah, I think we do tend to be pretty regularly victims of spotlight syndrome too, which is really hard when your entire job and basically the thing that you've set out to do is to romanticize every element of your life in a way that kind of results in this cool creative product. So it's really
Yeah.
hard to try to do that while also recognizing that even if you were to take a really well built wedding photography brand and start to totally undo your Instagram feed, right? You're posting behind the scenes from commercial stuff like that. You're posting a sales letter kind of thing to try to drum up some business for your, I don't know, business card design, whatever I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Recognizing that fewer people are likely going to see that than you think is kind of a freeing thing, and undoing that spotlight syndrome that we all kind of tend to suffer from a little bit can
Yes.
really set you up to move freely through and kind of navigate through that challenging scenario, right? I definitely struggled with that for a really long time, to accept that I don't always get to be a moody fine art photographer and still make money. But just recognizing that I have different audiences, right? Different audiences are going to see different things, and at the end of the day, I think like what 8% of your Instagram feed sees anything that you post anyway.
I don't even
So
know
like,
anymore. Yeah,
no, who
it's
gives a shit at this point? It's like I'm just gonna kind of surf through it, right? And
yeah.
when you accept that you're kind of moving freely, you're not quite as bogged down or tied to a certain brand development that you've done to that point. It can be really freeing. There's definitely a sunk cost kind of fallacy that goes along with brand building that can be really hard and kind of limiting when it comes time to have to pivot, especially
Yeah.
if, like you said, your creative interests change or the things that inspire you change. It can be really hard to look at the progress you've made so far, and even though you're getting all these external signals telling you, hey, start pursuing X, start pursuing Y, it can be really hard because we have that kind of relationship with our previous work built up to the point that it gets really hard to make that pivot, even if everything is telling you go this other direction, you know?
Right, right. I think we're lucky though, because you've set up your business, like you said, you've put those hard boundary lines in place. So it's almost like you have the freedom to do whatever the fuck you want, even if it's start another business or start something else, right? You always can go back to that thing. And that's what I tell
Yeah.
a lot of people is like, you never have to get rid of your past, right? Like it's always there. You had to go through whatever you went through to get to the point where you're at now and when you're going to go in the future. So don't like just this I'm terrible at this. Like I delete everything off the internet every like 2 or 3 years just because I'm like who the fuck is that?
Yeah.
I don't want it, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm like don't follow my advice. You know?
Yeah. I mean,
Do as I
there's
say,
nothing
not as
wrong
I
with
do.
that. like everybody's got to redefine themselves every now and then, and I totally understand that. Definitely had a few of those kind of like renaissances myself, you know, where
Yeah.
it's like even if I'm responding to these different inspirations and recognizing that my past is what's gotten me here, it still can be worth, even if it's just for the sake of quality, issuing
Yes.
kind of a rebrand. I know I've done that a couple times where my website goes through a complete overhaul every 6 months
Yes.
because I'm like, oh, I'm starting to connect with this different kind of quality or this different, even if I just did a new body of work that I think better represents what I'm trying to do today. But yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, especially when we're talking about this long game that we're all playing, right? And I'm talking about the value of this kind of compound interest invested into the things that you care about over time. Once you accept that it's not going to be a 3-month process, it might be a 3-year process or a 30-year process
Yeah.
to get to the position that you want to be at. 3 months off from that project is suddenly a drop in the bucket. One thing that I think people experience, especially creative folks, is that they'll start to work on a project and they'll work on it for 6 months and then go quiet for a month. Maybe they just lose inspiration
Yeah.
or other things kind of take precedent. And there's a lot of kind of self-hate that happens at that stage where people go, man, I can't even complete this 9-month project I set out to complete. And then it ends in this kind of spiral where you go, well, what am I even doing anyway? I couldn't take on this project. Clearly I failed at it. Let's trash it, start over, and just
Yeah.
start anew, right? But if we're really talking about having a bigger vision for that thing, it doesn't happen in 9 months. It might happen in 9 years. And then you can look back on that and go, 1 month out of those 9 years is nothing, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it
Absolutely.
comes to kind of developing that thing over time. So I think one big thing for young and kind of emerging artists to keep in mind is that concept of kind of creative scale. I always refer to it as kind of macro managing your own creative career because it's really easy to get caught up in the day to day and every single photo and every design and all that stuff. And it's really easy to kind of get bogged down and feel creative friction when you think about things in that way. But the second you zoom out and just recognize that you're not going to be a 6-figure photographer tomorrow. You might not be in 5 years, but in 10 years, yeah, you might be. Suddenly it takes a lot of pressure off of you to kind of I don't know, over deliver every day kind of thing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And especially with like the misconcept of like social media that you can get famous overnight and you totally can, it's totally feasible, but like it doesn't happen to everybody, right? So like
Right.
we always think that that's the next thing. That has to be it. Like that's the version of success that we want and it's not. Okay,
I know
Jake.
it's 12.
I
I know it's 12:30. Do you got time for one more thing? Because you
yes,
mentioned social
for it.
media, and now I want to hit it. I've been having kind of a parallel conversation to this whole concern with young photographers about devaluing their brand by having to sell to other audiences. A very parallel conversation that I've been having is just about the value of social media in the creative world today.
Yeah.
I'm speaking through the lens, pun intended, of photography because that's just what I'm experiencing right now in the
Yeah.
conversations I'm having. But I definitely feel like there's kind of a misconception about social media and the time economy of the thing that is causing a lot of friction in young and emerging artists,
Yeah.
where with a bit of perspective, I think a lot of folks could maybe soften some of that edge and take away a little bit of social media fatigue, which is one thing that I know is super prevalent. And I usually kind of frame it as this little exercise, right? Social media gives you unlimited potential to speak to unlimited amounts of people every day.
Yep.
Let's say, just for instance, you, through a really strong social media presence, speak to or have, impress your impressions, right? So you can measure impressions, 10,000 people per day. Parallel to that, you have a website and you have business cards with a single link on it that go to that website. You give out 10 of those per day. Over that one day, that one 24-hour period, 10,000 people see your post on Instagram, 500 click on your link, I don't know, 100 go to your next page, 10 go to your contact page, and one submits a contact info form that becomes work. And that total payoff is $500. Cool. So you converted those 10,000 impressions to $500. Or, parallel to that, you take those business cards that have singular link on it, and you give out 10 of them. 5 of them click the link, 2 of them go to the contact form, 1 submits info, and that becomes work for $500.
Mhm.
those equal out to be exactly the same product on that same amount of time invested, or on very different amounts of time invested. Because
Right.
yeah, so I think it's really important for young photographers to keep in mind the actual product of what they're working on and what they're selling, specifically with social media in the mix, because I think it's really easy to feel really heavy fatigue, despite it just maybe isn't not being the best channel for your audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was kind of a
Um,
really convoluted way of it. It was a
yes, but
long, yeah,
I've recently had the same discovery just by like going to a conference, right? And handing out, meeting people in real life. It's such a better way to get business for yourself than like trying to not convince, sorry, but like
yeah,
persuade people on social media, that you're a real person, you do good work, you do all these things, and you can just go hand somebody a card and have a conversation and cool. Like it's almost
yeah.
an immediate booking.
And the reason I describe it that way, and try to describe the scale of those two different systems for networking and selling, is because that's not to discount people who do receive the majority of their work through social media. It's just a very different channel. And if
Right.
you're a photographer who is feeling a lot of fatigue from managing your social media presence, but you have a really killer website, do a little bit of an analysis and just recognize where your actual profit is coming from and where your time is better spent. Obviously, at the end of the day, we're all going to want to build a really kick-ass social media presence that like speaks for us and generates leads just passively. But that's a really, really fucking hard thing to do, especially without capital to support it. So yeah, that'd be another kind of piece of, I guess, advice for like a young.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do a part two because I feel like we could talk for like another 4 hours.
I agree. We'll have to at some point break it down between the business of art and the kind of creative pieces to it, because I think
Yeah.
that we could go on both of those things for a minute here. But
Yeah, no, it's been fucking phenomenal. Like, I'm so happy that came on the podcast. But yeah, we will definitely set up like a round two or whatever we need to do to talk more about this because I love it. I love it
no,
so
no,
much.
amazing.
But before we go, tell people where they can find you online, any courses that you're doing, just how they can work with you if they want to.
Yeah, amazing. So go follow me on social media. I'm just kidding. No, no, I'm gonna get very hypocritical here, but no, my social media, Instagram is kind of the primary channel. It's just at Jake O Photo on Instagram, and then it's JAKEOPHOTO. I've had to clarify that my name isn't Jakeo a lot lately, so I want to make sure that I kind of define that out there. But then my website is just jakeophoto.com.
Cool.
So,
And I'll link those
yeah.
in the show notes. So if anybody wants to check them out. But Jake, thank you so much. You've been so amazing to talk to, and I can't wait to finish this conversation later. But guys, go check out Jake's social media and his website and get to know him better by sending him a message. And I will talk to you guys next week on a solo episode on the Artist Emancipation podcast.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.